Locked On NFL Thursday, a lot of rule changes made by the NFL, but what's one rule that we would change in the NFL? We're going to dive into that and much more on today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Let's roll,
baby!
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Football fans, welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast. Today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, here with my other local expert, Alex Clancy. We're going to be breaking down all of the biggest news in the NFL. Got a lot to discuss. Number one, some big rule changes coming from the NFL, but not everything we would like to see addressed was taken care of, unfortunately. So what changes would we make if we had the option? Let me know what rules you would change down in the comments. Also, Odell Beckham Jr. at NFL league meetings, trying to meet with teams and find his next destination. What would be the best fit? And then we will open Alex's mystery crate at the end of the show for a little game of Who Says No. Can't wait to dive into all of that. But first, we do got to talk about these NFL rule changes. And a lot was changed by the NFL, but nothing too crazy, in my opinion. The first thing that I want to point out is now you can wear number 0 in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles actually put that out into the proposal list, and it was approved. So number 0 will be available. We got some other changes like to the play clock following an instant replay. Got some changes on reviews. Now, an automatic review will happen on any failed fourth down attempt. They made it a major penalty, a personal foul for tripping. So it won't just be tripping. It's literally a personal foul for doing that. There were some things that weren't changed, like the onside kick situation. And I thought that was a shame because the NFL says that they're looking for 13 to 14% recovery rate. Last year was an all-time low at 4%. So that's clearly not going the way that they were hoping for it to go. And I was hoping we would see some drastic change there. But we'll talk about what rules we want to see change now. Alex, we know the rules that did get changed, some of the big ones at least. What is one thing that you would change with the NFL rulebook if you were running the league for the day?
So there are two. One has nothing to do with the field. Tyler, I've talked about this a lot on my podcast, Locked on Cardinals, and this one. Hyphenate the season year. If the playoffs are going to be the next year, if you ask me who won the Super Bowl in 2022, I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you talking about the 2022 season? Or are you talking about the team that actually won a Super Bowl in 2022, which would be the LA Rams?
Right.
So just hyphenate it. Every other franchise, every other major sport, basketball and hockey, hyphenate it because their year is split on 2 different calendar years. Mother of everything. Why? Why not? That's one. Number 2, and this is something that I think everybody, you included, I do impress you sometimes, Tyler Rowland of Locked on Titans. Not all penalties that happen on offense and defense in the same play should offset. There's no reason why a personal foul and a holding call should offset. There's no reason why offsides and a personal foul should offset. A personal foul should trump anything else because that is an egregious play in some form or fashion. So that should not just be offset by another penalty by the opposing team on the same play.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, why would, like you said, an offsides outweigh a holding when the yardage that's assigned to those is different. It doesn't really make 5 equals 10, 5 equals 15, all that, the way they do it. It doesn't really make sense. So I get that too. One big thing for me, and I thought it was something, that you were going to bring up, honestly, is these roughing the passer calls are affecting games. And I think out of all the things that upset the fans when they're watching the game, there is nothing worse than having a roughing the passer call on a clean sack. I mean, and defense, it's just so hard to play defense. There are so many rules already, if called to the T, could hurt the defense and help the offense. You can't mess up this consistently on calling the roughing the passer penalty. It needs to be reviewable. I know that we don't want to do too many reviews because it is a television product, but at the end of the day, I've just seen so many bad roughing the passer calls made that were nowhere even close, that they have to do something to slow that down, whether it's reviewable by, the officials, New York, or if the coaches can add it to the challenge. No matter what, I think you need to do it. And since you threw in a bonus, I'll throw in a bonus as well. You should never run out of challenges. If you have to, we've seen too many examples of coaches having to challenge things that should have never been called wrong. And you can get your 2 challenges right and get a 3rd challenge, but after that, you're still screwed. So I think as long as you win your challenges, you should never be out of challenges. That should never go away.
Yeah, or at least bump it to 5. Like, the game's so slow anyways. Remember, folks, football is slower than the game of baseball per play. It doesn't seem like it, but it is. Especially with that long play clock. It's like it's 40 seconds a play. So, and then Tyler, one more thing that's never going to happen, but it should. One way to balance out the referees taking over all professional sports, it seems, is take whatever percentage that you fine players for and transition that to bad calls made by refs. Because if that's the case, if it's so egregious and it's not reviewable, if you fine a ref $1,000 for a bad call, maybe things will go a little bit more. Not like for player safety things, but like roughing the passer. If there's something that's so egregious that's not reviewable, there's got to be some accountability held, and not just a 2-minute drill where it's like, oh yeah, that was a bad call. That does legitimately nothing except for piss the team off that the call was against. That's it.
I will say this. I think that there needs to be a little more transparency in the officiating. And I think the big change that I would make with officiating is I would make referees full-time employees of the league. Yeah. They can afford it, and then they can focus more on training. They can focus more on film study, looking at the right call, the wrong call, how it should be called, all of that. But the problem is, being an official is hard enough already. You're the worst man in the building. You're everybody's worst enemy, no matter what team it is. You're getting screamed at the whole game by both sides. If they start fining guys and taking their money away, they'll just quit. You just can't do that. You just can't fine these. They're not making the money that the players are. So there's the only way to fix it for me is to make them full time. Because if you start fining guys for bad calls, they're just going to quit, and then you're going to have worse official quality anyway. I get what you're saying. We're just trying to find a solution here to how egregious the officiating can be sometimes. But I think the first step that you take is making them full-time employees and paying them a really good salary. Then maybe you might be able to get into, an adequate fine if a mistake is made, things like that. But moving right along, we got to talk about Odell Beckham Jr., who was at NFL league meetings, meeting with teams, trying to find his next destination. What would be the best fit for OBJ? We're going to discuss that in just a moment. Before we do, I want to let you know that today's episode of the Locked On NFL podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, the NFL season may be over, but it is the best time of year for basketball. We're getting ready to go into the Final Four. The NBA is heading into the playoffs. Right now is the best time to get in on the action at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets, even if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel. FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up today and claim your no sweat first bet. You can wager on everything from the money line to the point spread to how many points a team is going to score, how many points a guy is going to score or a girl is going to score in the college basketball tournament. Who's going to cut down the nets? There's so much on FanDuel. The app is safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. So don't miss your shot to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel.
Locked on NFL Thursday rolls on. Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. Tyler Rowland, Locked on Titans. Thank you for making Locked on NFL your first listen each and every day, free and available on all platforms and on YouTube if you're watching our big dumb faces right now. Owners meetings in full swing out here in Arizona. Odell Beckham Jr., before we jump into teams, isn't it fascinating? He doesn't get enough credit for completely changing his image. At all. Like, going to Cleveland is usually a place where things get exposed. And we saw a little bit of it, but it wasn't so much me. It was more that Baker Mayfield, he wasn't getting targets as a wide receiver one. Like, they ran the ball so much with Baker Mayfield. I root for Odell Beckham now. He could have won Super Bowl MVP if he didn't get hurt in the middle of the game. Like,
he was about to win it.
He is must-watch TV, and not just for the off-field antics like it used to be on top of the play. Like, I'm rooting for him, and I hope that he finds a place where he can flourish because he's still pretty young. Coming off ACL surgery isn't nearly what it used to be, obviously. So there are a couple team names that have been drifted out there. Cleveland was a big one for like 10 minutes. Dallas was a big one for 15 minutes. Baltimore is another one, which I don't know why anybody would want to go play there, especially with Lamar Jackson in flux, whether he's going to come back or not.
Right.
For you, let's do one like actual rational one and your dream spot for Odell Beckham Jr. to land.
Well, I think the rational one is the Jets, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's the rational one. Go play with Aaron Rodgers. They're trying to load up for a one-year push to see if they can win. You get to go back to New York City where, as time has passed, like you said, Odell Beckham, I think that performance in the Super Bowl was just monstrous for his career and his image. And I agree with you. He was going to win Super Bowl MVP at that rate. He was cooking in that game. He looked fantastic. And let's not forget, he's got a lot of drama. He's a diva, all this, but he might be the most talented receiver I've ever watched in terms of just pure, raw talent. I mean, I'd still go with Randy Moss or Calvin Johnson.
Antonio Brown's up there. He's an Antonio Brownish.
Right. Odell Beckham is in that conversation of the most talented receivers I've ever seen. And for me, you add him to New York. New York feels differently about Odell now than they did right when he left the Giants. There's a different feeling, a different appreciation for him. So I know he'd be going to the Jets and not the Giants, but the New York media. He'd spend a lot of time in New York City, not in New Jersey. You know what I mean? If he was with the team. So I think he can handle the media spotlight to go back to New York City and kind of put a cap on things there with a good season, maybe a playoff run with the Jets, playing with Aaron Rodgers. I think realistically, that makes a ton of sense. For me, fantasy-wise, not fantasy football, but just pure enjoyment of watching football, it's the Chiefs.
Yeah.
It's the Chiefs, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes was able to win a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill because he's an absolute freak of nature. But you add in an elite receiver when they're healthy, and it just makes the Chiefs even that much more fun to watch. So right now, with no Juju, I think that Odell makes a ton of sense to go to Kansas City, and he could be really fun in that offense and fun to watch, which is most important at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you don't need to be tall in that offense. They haven't had a tall receiver of actual consequence. Like, you can't really count MVS as, even though he had monster game. I think it was in the playoffs. He had a monster game, or the Super Bowl even. But, it just wasn't, you don't have to be tall to be in that offense. Yeah, and that's fine. Like, the unfortunate part for him was that he missed this year. Because this year was the year where he wasn't going to garner $20 million and he could sign a Juju Smith-Schuster deal and go there or go to Buffalo. Now he needs one more payday. Like he needs a 3-year, 60 mil with, 40 million guaranteed or something like that. And I think he's going to get it. Where I think he should go, which makes the most sense because they overpay everybody, is Dallas. I just think that it just makes sense.
I had that written down as well.
He doesn't have to deal with the elements. He could, if you're going to tell me CeeDee Lamb would 100% be wide receiver 1, I'd say Huey Fish. I think he would walk in there and be wide receiver 1 if he's healthy because, as you mentioned, he's one of the more upsetting career arcs after what started with no real great quarterback play in New York, going to Cleveland, no real great quarterback play there, and then, going to the Rams finally as a second option and being this all-world guy for like 8 games or 10 games, whatever he was there. He had Von Miller year over there on the offensive side. For me, though, like if money wasn't the issue, if he didn't want $20 million, I'd want him to go to like either Cincinnati or Buffalo because Cincinnati and Buffalo need to make you want to throw up with how many offensive weapons they have. Both of them. I think Buffalo needs him more. He can play in the cold. He can run all the routes. Like, he's a Stephon Diggs kind of receiver. He's not big.
He was Stephon Diggs before Stephon Diggs, okay?
Yeah, but Stephon Diggs is so much more regimented. Like, he runs routes. Odell Beckham just finds open space. It's so much sexier to see Odell Beckham run routes because normally he's not doing it like by the book. Stephon Diggs is a robot when he runs. He's the best. Keenan Allen are the best route.
And that's a compliment.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you put both of them with Gabe Davis and have Gabe Davis be a wide receiver 3 like he is, he's not a wide receiver 2, I think it'd be fantastic. But I think Dallas, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. That offense needs to flow without Zeke. They're going to run the ball more, but it's going to be Tony Pollard and probably Bijan Robinson. And it's going to be a different offense this year, and it's going to be more Dak-centric, even though I think Mike McCarthy wants to run the ball more. So, I mean,
I think that's a great option.
Now, Tyler and I like to have some fun here, and because
we're the same height, me and Kyler.
You are, and one of you is going to be the next quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, seemingly in the next couple of years, according to
happening.
According to Tyler Roland Stradamus. It doesn't really work, but
it doesn't.
We can talk about what everybody else talks about. Well, where should this player sign that is a low level guy? We go big here because it's fun to talk about sports, and that's what we're gonna do. Who says no? Lamar Jackson edition. We will hit that next as Locked On NFL Thursday rolls on. And thank you for making Locked On NFL Thursday your first listen each and every day. Now make your second listen after our final segment. Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, from free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to be a successful NFL franchise every Monday through Friday. Find Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tyler, I love these. I love these segments. I just do. It's been such a weird offseason. Like, this is the bona fide definition of, even if things aren't going absolutely insane, the NFL offseason still wins. Sure, there's more player movement in the NBA, even though the NFL is definitely, shortening that gap. With free agency not having that many huge names, like I know Deron Payne and others made a lot of money, but it wasn't star-studded like it will be in 2024. Right. Now, we could talk about some boring moves that could be made, secondary or tertiary moves to bolster teams' rosters, or we could talk about why Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers haven't been talked about in a trade swap. Why isn't that I brought this up a month ago when the Aaron Rodgers news first came out, and I'm like, okay, Lamar Jackson's unhappy. Aaron Rodgers is unhappy. Why not just swap them? Their contracts would swap. Imagine Lamar Jackson in Lambeau. He already plays in cold weather. They want to run the ball anyways. He's got a couple weapons. He's got a tight. It would be pretty much a swapping franchises for Lamar Jackson. Pretty much be the same thing. Just with more of an offensive-minded head coach, probably a stronger running game, a little bit better offensive line, and they've got an up-and-coming defense. and Aaron Rodgers would go to a place that isn't Green Bay or the Jets at this point, because it seems like the Jets have all the leverage. If that was brought to the table, Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, who says no? Green Bay or Baltimore, or either, for an Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson swap?
Okay, so I think Green Bay says no. For whatever reason, I really think they want to roll with Jordan Love. And you get the benefit of having a quarterback on his rookie contract for one more year. All of the issues that people have with Lamar are still real. I think that Green Bay wants to get rid of Aaron Rodgers, go with a young quarterback and see what they got. So I think Green Bay says no. I do. I think they would rather roll with Jordan Love for a year than meet Lamar Jackson's contract demands and not get picks back for Aaron Rodgers. If they did a swap like that, they're not going to get picks back for Rodgers anymore. If anything, they'd be sending a pick with Rodgers to get a hold of Lamar Jackson. So I think with that in mind, I think the Packers say no.
I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. It's not positive Jordan Love. It's negative Aaron Rodgers. That's why they're being positive about Jordan Love, because he's not Aaron Rodgers. If you can offer
I agree.
Well, and the thing is, they ain't getting a first-round pick now, Green Bay. So do you want to trade Aaron Rodgers for maybe 2 seconds and a fourth or something like that, and maybe a player to come back? Or do you want to swap, be like, okay, listen, it's Lamar Jackson. He's plug and play in this offense. Imagine Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, and Lamar Jackson in the backfield. Like, it's not ideal, but I think neither say no. I think that is a perfect swap. Young, franchise guy, wants to win, can play in the cold because he's done it in Baltimore for the last handful of seasons. Doesn't need a whole lot of offensive firepower to win from the wide receiver group. He doesn't. And that's an upgrade over there. Aaron Rodgers goes to Baltimore. They draft a wide receiver if they trade him before the draft. And, you go off into the sunset for 2 years where you automatically are in contention in the AFC. A lot further along than you would be if without Lamar Jackson or without Aaron Rodgers. Okay, pivot. This is one that I was going to talk about. I do have to give credit to Jody Ayler, former associate of mine, Fox Sports 910 Phoenix. I was there producing and hosting shows for 5 years. I was going to make this the title segment of my podcast 2 days ago on Locked On Cardinals. He posted the Twitter poll about it. I got to give him credit because he did it first. Kyler Murray for Lamar Jackson. Who says no?
The Ravens. The Ravens
Why?
say no. Because Kyler's got a torn ACL. And at the end of the day, it's what you believe. I believe that there are issues with Kyler Murray and his study habits. I don't think that came out of nowhere. I don't think that's a complete lie, complete falsification. Somebody just made it up and it became a big story. Like, I don't believe that. I think that there are some leadership issues, some study issues with Kyler Murray, not to mention the huge contract that he's on that I don't know if he's worth, plus the ACL injury. I think the Ravens would say no, and they'd rather just hold on to Lamar Jackson and look for a different trade partner.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that Lamar Jackson's missed 60% of the last 2 seasons. All he does is miss time now. That's all Lamar Jackson does is miss time.
Well, now it's coming out that people are worried about his diet and his sleep habits. Like, is he taking care of his body when he's not at work and stuff? I think those are similar to the Kyler Murray concerns about, is he doing what he's supposed to be doing when he's not in the facility, when he's off the field, when he's not at practice? All those things matter a ton. So clearly, those are 2 guys that have some issues like that people are worried about.
Yeah, and listen, to answer that question, I'm just making up my own rules here. I'd say both say no. Like, I don't think that that's an obvious swap. Like, Kyler Murray, even though he's still learning, still getting better. I still think that if you listen to Locked On Cardinals even for a second, you'll know that I believe truly, and I think this is true, that Cliff Kingsbury's held him back during his first 4 seasons. He hasn't been given the coaching and teaching and leadership that quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson have been given, that Joe Burrow's been given, that Patrick Mahomes obviously has been given, that Josh Allen especially has been given. And Kyler Murray can still throw a team back in the game way, way, way more effectively and efficiently than Lamar Jackson can. And I don't think it's even close. Like if you're the Ravens, you go down 17 points, you lose. Like that's not Lamar Jackson cannot throw the ball 45 times for 380 yards and 4 touchdowns unless it's against Miami in week 1, 4 or 5 years ago when everybody was already wanting out of Miami with Brian Flores there. Like Lamar Jackson can't do it when you're down 17. He just can't do it. Kyler Murray can. And I trust Kyler Murray and his throwing ability and his elusivity more so than I trust Lamar Jackson and his skill set.
Well, that's interesting. I think both those guys are going to be interesting guys to watch.
For sure.
They're both dudes right now who were considered like potential elite quarterbacks at one point in time, had some rough couple of seasons here, and it's kind of interesting to see where they fall in the hierarchy of quarterbacks in the NFL. But that's going to do it for us today on a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. Check out tomorrow's show with your boy Q and Chris Carter breaking down all the latest NFL news. That's going to do it for me, Tyler Rowland, and my co-host, Alex Clancy. You guys stay safe and enjoy your weekend.